Hey everybody, Tekking101 here today with a video chronicling every single Sternritter in the Bleach series. Who they are, what their power is, what their holy form looks like. As you could probably imagine, it's a long list and it's probably going to be a long-ass video, so you might want to make like Sternritter G and get some snacks. Alright, here we go. Letter A, the almighty Yhwach. Alright, so I'm not going to spend too much time on Yhwach. I've already made 2 other videos about him discussing who he is exactly and all of his powers that he has. Some of you might not even consider him a Sternritter because he's more like the king that the Sternritters fight for. He's like the Christ figure for all Quincy's. But considering how relevant he is to the plot and the Sternritter's existence hinging on his power, I have to mention him a little bit. Alright, so Yhwach has a literal shit ton of powers, but the one that's the most pertinent here is his ability to divide out fragments of his soul. Most specifically, in this case, he can carve a script or a letter into a Quincy and then enact a special power onto them. Now, it's a little bit confusing as whether or not Yhwach has all the powers in them and he's just giving them out to the Sternritters, or like he just carves the letter into their soul and they awaken the ability themselves. That's kind of up for debate. We know that there's a blood ritual that you have to partake in to become a Sternritter. To gain this power, you have to like drink Yhwach's blood, as we saw Uryu do. Yhwach's power as the Almighty basically just gives him the ability of omnipotence and omniscience. He's able to see everything around him, both figuratively and literally, in that he can see the future. However, even this power seems to have a little bit of a faults in it. He wasn't able to see other events that involved gods. Like, he couldn't foretell the Mimi Hage appearing and trying to protect the Soul King or anything like that. So, while it seems like for the most part he has pretty good, you know, omniscience, he does have some faults there that could maybe be exploited in this final battle. Letter A again, Uryu Ishida. Okay, once again, not going to spend a lot of time on Uryu for obvious reasons. He's part of the main cast of the series. You had over almost 700 chapters to learn about the dude. But if you do need a refresher, I did make a discussion video about him a while back. And honestly, in the context of him being a Sternritter, there's really not much to talk about here. We don't know what his power is, what the A stands for. I'm going to assume, though, even though he's the same letter as Yhwach, he's not the Almighty also. He probably has another script that Yhwach bestowed upon him. We know so far in this point in the story that he's sort of a double agent, that he's has his own devices trying to go against Yhwach, trying to destroy him rather than help him out. But we don't know if, you know, Uryu's a pretty smart dude. That's all I'm saying. This might be like a double cross of a double cross. I don't know. We know Haschwalth doesn't trust him as far as he can throw him. But yeah, not really much else to talk about here. The powers that he exhibited are pretty much the same exact powers he's always exhibited throughout the series. Just he has like a new bow and everything like that. Yhwach did refer to him as the successor of the Quincy's, the person that's going to take up the throne after he leaves. So we don't really know what's up with Yhwach's plan, if that's just, you know, him just blowing up Uryu to make him seem like a bigger deal to all the Sternritters, like to motivate them, or if he actually has like a bigger master plan, or if he's just going to toss him out with yesterday's garbage after he's done. Because Uryu even came out and said that he wants to, basically, he has a grudge against Yhwach because he's the one that pretty much led to his mother Katagiri's death. But yeah, I go all into all that in the discussion videos, so check that out below. Letter B, Jugram Haschwalth. Alright, so Jugo is essentially the true leader of the Sternritters. His full title is the Sternritter Grandmaster, so if you're going to look at Yhwach as the king, Haschwalth is essentially his right-hand man, his highest-ranking general that commands his army. Fun fact, we don't really know what the B stands for. It's been pretty much laid on that it's the balance, and given what, you know, Haschwalth's ability is when it compares to Yhwach, you know, the night and day sort of thing, it's most likely going to be balance. I'm just saying we've never seen a little info card expressly saying what the B stands for. Jugo is a very unique case in the Sternritters. When he was born, he exhibited no Quincy abilities, like the ability to pull in ratio or anything like that. He couldn't do that. He was a complete failure. Him and Basby have a history. They grew up in some country out in the middle of nowhere. They resented Yhwach because Yhwach burned down Basby's house and killed his family and destroyed his castle. And then, you know, Jugo was living in a forest with his uncle at the time, who was probably a diddler, but that's another story. Anyway, Yhwach burned that forest down, and Jugo most likely killed his uncle there. And they spent the next 3 years training to fight against Yhwach. Eventually, they met the dude. This at this point where Yhwach really explained who Jugo was. He was the special chosen Quincy, the selected child that was born every 200 years, and he was one of them, and Yhwach was one of them. And unlike Yhwach, though, he doesn't have the same abilities to like take in people's souls and foster them out and, you know, take them back after they die. But Jugo is able to basically give out power to whoever's around them. Bazby's potential was raised exponentially because Jugo was around him when they were training. So Jugo took on the position as the leader of the Sternritters, and whenever it's night out, whenever Yhwach has to go to sleep to replenish his powers, Jugo receives all the powers of the Almighty, I guess, on top of his already, you know, very impressive combat skills with his sword and everything like that. He does have the ability to see into the future and everything, but it's probably not as refined as Yhwach, I would imagine. He's probably not as used to using it as Yhwach is. On top of that, his abilities themselves as the balance, I guess, are rather confusing. We only really saw them demonstrated one time when he was going to execute BG9 and Kangdu. He tried to cut Kangdu, who was the iron, and he blocked his sword with his iron arm, but then he's like, oh, the scales are tipping in my favor now, and then he was able to cut straight through him. So maybe his ability is like whatever, you know, is unbalanced in the battlefield, he can shift it like scales, and he's like, oh, I can't cut you, well, now I change the scales, and now I can cut you. Seems like kind of an OP ability, but Jugo's kind of an OP character. You know, him and Uryu are fighting at the moment. They're pretty much destined to have their epic battle. So, yeah, that is Jugram Haschwalth, Sternritter B. Sternritter C, the compulsory Pernida Parnkgjas. Pernida is a member of Yhwach's elite Sternritter guard, the Schutzstaffen, and the absolute weirdest Sternritter. It mostly hides itself under a hood, only revealing a pair of eyes and sometimes a hand crawling out, but it's really creepy. It doesn't talk, it just kind of stands there and breathes. It is later revealed that Pernida is in fact the left arm of the Soul King, and I don't mean that figuratively like, oh, it is the left arm and it has certain duties that the Soul King... No, it is quite literally a giant left hand. It's able to increase its size, tear itself apart, and then duplicate itself whenever it gets injured. If ever it gets a piece blasted off of it, it'll just create another hand. It is able to transform in some way because just the fact that it would be able to hide under that hood to begin with means that it would have to transform. Also, we saw other hands coming out of it at some point, so it can clearly do something along those lines. Now, the ability of the compulsory itself allows Pernida to manipulate nerves. It usually shoots them out underneath its fingernails, but we see it can shoot them out from pretty much any part of its body, hand body. Anyway, whatever the nerves come in contact with, whether it be inanimate or organic, it's able to manipulate. Whether it be stone walls, it can move and attack, or if it comes in contact with an organic body, it can infiltrate the nerves in that body and then twist and contort it in all different horrible, grotesque, saw-like ways, basically compressing it down to the size of a meatball, as Mayuri called it. He was able to rip Kenpachi's arm pretty much right off of his body, so you don't want to basically come in contact with the nerves, because if you do, you're pretty much completely fucked right there, unless you're Mayuri and you can kind of like, you know, do a little bit of makeshift surgery. But even in that case, you don't want to come in contact with these things. Since it's also the left arm of the Soul King and governs progress, Pernida's intelligence seems to be kind of like unstable. When it began the fight against Kenpachi and Mayuri, it spoke not at all. It didn't seem it had really that much intelligence, but slowly throughout the fight it began to, you know, its vocabulary began to get a little bit more eloquent. Eventually it got up to the level of Kenpachi, and then finally near the end of the fight it was able to have similar intellect to Mayuri. Now, we never got to see its holy form if it ever did have one, but we did get to see it multiply a few times and exhibit all these other abilities, which are just as interesting. Pernida was killed when it defeated Nemu and then lapped up her corpse. However, Nemu's corpse has like a bunch of like self-replicating regenerating cells, so Pernida basically began to hyper-regenerate at an incredible rate and basically just exploded into goo. I say maybe with the air quotes because considering it's like the left arm of the Soul King and this really relevant thing, and we don't really know everything about what's up with it yet, or the right arm for that matter, I'm kind of hesitant to say that it's gone forever and we're never going to see it again. But, we can all hope. We can all hope. Sternritter D, the death-dealing Askin Nakk Vaar. Askin is another member of the Schutzstaffen and my favorite Sternritter, and it's kind of hard not to like the guy. He's basically the closest thing you're going to get to Deadpool in the Bleach series. He's fourth wall breaking sometimes. He always brings up how, you know, other characters are monologuing constantly. Even up into his death, he's like given a death spiel like about his ability, and then he's just like, you know what, fuck it, I'm done. Anyway, his ability, the death dealing, is essentially working with the lethal dosage. Now, I'm not going to stand here and explain everything to you. It's kind of like a toxicology, biology lesson that you probably all learned in high school at some point. So there's a link in the description to go read all about median lethal dosage, so you can go figure that out. Otherwise, Here you go, really quick. You can pause the video, and here's what his power does. If you want me to stream it down really simplistically, I would say his powers deal with poisoning and immunity. Poisoning not just in the sense that he can poison you with a substance. No, no, no. He can turn any substance poisonous, whether it be Reiatsu, oxygen, nitrogen, your own blood in your system. He can make that anything toxic to you beyond a certain lethal dosage. Along with this is his immunity. Askin is essentially nigh invincible. He really can't die unless you really have to pound at him to make it happen. You can't just simply attack him with normal swords or attacks. Anything that's Reiatsu based is pretty much not going to work. An example of this is when Yoruichi struck him with lightning multiple times and he was able just to brush that off. Yushiro basically blew his fucking body into cinders. He was able to brush that off no problem. After he experiences the attack one time, his body remembers the Reiatsu it came from, and he is now immune to it. So even the same attack with the same power done immediately after the first one, he could still just, brush it off, no problem, because he's Askin Nakk Vaar, bitches. He has a variety of different techniques hinging around the idea of poisoning or immunities. His gift balls can be sent out, and whenever they come in contact with a Shinigami or Hollow alike, they can basically change anything in the surrounding area into poison. As I said, blood or air or whatever he wants to drop them down. He has another technique called Gift Bad, which basically stretches out the entire area like a pool of poison that everyone drops down on. He has another technique once he goes into his holy form, Hassian, God's poison taster, called Gift Ring, which when he shoots out anything that it comes in contact with, all the death-dealing powers are compressed on that one point and is killed and eliminated immediately, no matter what it is. His ultimate technique is Gift Ball Deluxe, which summons a giant gift ball as sort of like a perimeter inside, and he can seal his opponent in so they can't get out no matter what. Unless you're Urahara Kisuke, and the Gift Ball Deluxe has the own abilities, inside of it where, you really can't move around too much because he can manipulate all the immunities and all the poisons himself. Now, you can kill him, it's not impossible, it's just very unlikely. You basically can't use anything Reiatsu-based or anything really that clever. The only way you can kill him, as what we've seen so far, is just sheer physical damage, like Grimmjow ripping out his fucking heart and crushing it Mortal Kombat style. That'll do it. Though even in that case, he was still able to stay alive for a few minutes afterwards, and when he finally does kick the bucket, the powers of his death dealing magnify to insane degrees, so anyone that's immediately around him is going to get dropped probably, and when he does die. I would love to go more about Askin. He's my favorite Sternritter. As I said, I could gush about him all day, but I gotta move on. Thanks for existing, bro. You're my favorite. I think Kubo hit the nail on the head right there when he came up with your character design. Alright, moving on! Sternritter E, the Explode, Bambietta Basterbine. Okay, so she is the first female Sternritter to ever be revealed, and she's kind of like the leader of this little subgroup. I call them the Sternritter clique of like the female knights inside of the Sternritter, making up of the Sternritter T, P, G, and Z. She has the ability of the Explode, which allows her to send out her Reiatsu and comes in contact with anything, and then it subsequently blows up. Now, keep in mind, she's not using her Reiatsu as a bomb, like whatever the race she comes in contact with explodes. No, whatever her Reiatsu comes in contact with actually becomes the bomb, and it explodes itself, so you can't simply just, like, knock her explosions away or nullify them or anything like that, because they'll, infect whatever you're using. Like, if you're using a sword or something and hoping just to swat away your explosion, it ain't gonna happen. Your sword will then explode. She's a little bit, I would say, unstable personality-wise, and that's not just, bitches be crazy. No, she's a little bit fucked up. She brings men back to her chambers under the auspices of having sex before she just splits them down the middle, stem to stern, like praying mantis style. Maybe possibly before or after they've had sex, I'm not really sure. And, yeah, that's what she does in her free time to calm down. Anyway, we don't know what her holy form is called, but it gives her the appearance of sort of a harpy. Her wings extend over her arms, and then she can shoot out her reishi bombs more efficiently through the wings. She stole Sajin Komamura's Bankai Tokujo Tengen Myo, but she never used it on him or anybody else, and it was eventually taken back from her, and that's why she could go into her holy form against him. She was defeated by Komamura when he went into his Dongaijo Bankai, and which was basically a massive Reiatsu, so her Reiatsu bombs didn't do anything, and knocked her off to the side of the Seirete. She was pretty much battered and beaten on the battlefield when the other Sternritter clique members showed up, and Giselle ended up killing her and turning her into one of her zombies, and then she was under her command for a little bit there before she was defeated by Charlotte Coolhorn. Last time we saw her, she was kind of alive. She was being sucked on by Giselle. That sounded a little bit weird. No, that sounded about as sexual as, yeah, it's worse. Whatever you're thinking of, it was worse, if you don't know the context. So yeah, last time we saw her, she was still technically alive, or as alive as you can get being a zombie, but we don't really know what happened to her since. Sternritter F, the Fear, as Nodt. Oh. Do I have to talk about him? Okay, fine. Alright, so Nodt is one of the first Sternritter that showed up in the invasion. He fought against Renji and Byakuya. He managed to steal Byakuya's Bankai Senbonzakura Kageyoshi. He later used it on him to drill it into a wall, so Nodt came pretty damn close to killing off Byakuya. If it wasn't for the fangirls that saved him, you can always rely on them. Anyway, yeah, Nodt looks like the love child of Sadako and Karasu from Yu Yu Hakusho. I think that's a pretty apt comparison there. His ability is the Fear, which manifests in the form of all these thorns that he can summon around his body. Anything that is struck by these thorns is infected by Nodt's fear goo, which has this unyielding, whatever the most intense fear for that person is, infects their body. There's really no way you can avoid it. Byakuya tried to be like, oh, well, you know, I've always experienced fear. I just think about Rukia whenever I'm feeling afraid during battle, and that makes me feel like, oh god, no! Oh god! Rukia, what did they do to you, you motherfucker? Okay, that's why I didn't want to talk about this guy. He also has a button fetish. Whatever, that's one of the least weird things about his character, but thought I should bring it up. Yeah, so he pummeled Byakuya into a wall, and eventually during the second invasion, after his Bankai was taken from him, he fought against Rukia, who seemed to be put up a pretty good fight against him. Rukia could not prevent the fear goo from coming in contact with her. It can't be stopped by ice or any physical boundary. It kind of just slips through whatever. It's sort of like this symbolic thing that represents fear, and if you get anything splashed on you, it's just one drop is enough to have the fear overtake you. As for his holy form, well, I guess you could call it unholy form, he basically turns into a Slipknot video. It's called Tartara Foros. It's one of the few holy forms that actually have a name. While in this form, he's able to summon up this giant area around him with all these eyes coming in contact, so it doesn't matter. He doesn't need to use the fear goo anymore. Basically, whenever the eyes come in contact with the enemy's eyes, just through the optic nerves alone, it's able to inject fear directly into them there. Although this area can be destroyed from the outside, as we saw with Byakuya. He made one more final transformation before he was killed by Rukia. He was able to basically shed his body, and this amorphous thing came out like a giant bubbly version of himself. You know, it's all, you know, grotesque and bleeding and leaking, and yeah, we didn't really get to see what happened much there because Rukia immediately proceeded to go into Bankai and freezer dry his ass. He's also one of the few Sternritters that actually have a backstory. We actually got to see what he did before being met by Yhwach and given the powers of the fear. He was this very sickly man that had some sort of respiratory disease. I think maybe had cancer or something, tuberculosis. He was in a hospital bed. He was in constant pain. He was very religious, hoping that one day he goes to heaven and everything's cool. And then Yhwach arrived after he did his holy selection. He was one of the few that was affected by it, and he bestowed upon the fear onto Nodt. So yeah, I really wish we get to see more backstories with Sternritters, but whatever. Alright, moving on.